Welcome, EO Dallas, to Connecting the Journey. As y'all remember, the theme of this show is that as entrepreneurs, we're always looking forward. We're always looking to the latest, greatest, next big thing. But very seldom we slow down, slow our brains down, and look back to where we came from. And I truly believe that that's the only place that you can move forward with gratitude. And I'm really excited about my guest today, because actually the concept of the show really came from a story that I'm going to tell at an EO event that really kind of cemented that concept into my head. So I'm really excited to have Steve Neuner on the show. Welcome to the show, brother.
Glad to be here, man. Good to always be with you.
Really excited to be with you. We don't get to hang out that much, but when we do, it's always powerful.
Yeah.
So let me share their story. So we were at Roundup at Texas Stadium, and we got down to George Bush was talking.
Yeah.
And we got down to the
great moment.
To the floor. We had got to hang out. You know, it was awesome. Like, people were throwing footballs or having drinks on the field. And we get to our seats, and I'm like, man, these are awesome seats. But they were a little off-centered, and we were just here, and it was something silly. I was like, but it'd be cool if this and that. And you just literally, just you didn't do it, but metaphorically just slapped me in my face and was like, dude, you're living in the Gap. I'm like, what? He's like, you're living in the Gap. And that just stuck with me so much, because I think other people have the disease that I have, that we look at something and it could be an amazing experience, but I don't want to say we want to critique it, but we want to make it better, right? Oh, what if this? What if that, right? Mm-hmm. And it's tough because that's innately in us, mm-hmm. and it's not a negative thing, but it just shifts you. And so, man, I'll tell you, that had a really big impact on my life, really kind of the thesis of this show. And I'll tell you, as hard as you slap me in my face, it's something that I still am aware of, and I say struggle with on a daily.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad it was not a real slap.
It felt like one.
It's probably the hardest kind, right? So it's like more of a gut punch.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's a really cool gift of entrepreneurs that we, and just people in general, right? But entrepreneurs on another level, we envision a future that doesn't yet exist, and we use that future every day, and it gets us out of bed, and we go and do things that most people are afraid of, and we rally people around doing those things, and we get people to use courage and go into the unknown, and so that same ability to see that vision also has the ability to see all the things that could have gone better.
Yeah. Right?
And so, like you said, I don't know that it's a bad thing, but I think it is not always the most useful thing when it's stealing your joy of what's so in the moment, right?
That's exactly. It's like a joy robber.
Yeah.
And it's hard to. I was actually doing my forum update last night, and I was going through the things, and all the negative stuff and on the significance. I was like, man, it's so hard to practice what you preach and what you believe, mm-hmm. and it's hard to see the gain in the storm, mm-hmm. right? And so it's easier to just fall back in the gap, because that's what kind of gives us energies, is looking at the things that we can improve and make better, mm-hmm. but it's just sucking the joy out of it.
I think it steals the joy, and I think also sometimes when we're only doing that, we're sometimes unaware of the momentum and the raw material around us, even in the sucky things. Like, how many times you look back, how many times did the really sucky things actually be the catalyst for that next big growth spurt, right? And so, I just think it's but it's all the raw material, the sucky things, that turned into that beautiful thing. And so I think that the more, even when we're in something amazing, just being able to look around and appreciate what's good about it will help us figure out where's the momentum to build upon, right?
Yeah.
And I appreciate, like I said, you sharing that, but it's honestly a brilliant concept of Dan Sullivan's, right? And Ben Hardy wrote the book about it. So anyone who wants to deep dive on it, it's a profound book.
It really is, and it's good to have people around you that understand it, because they can check you.
Yeah.
Right? They can say, hey, man, you're living in the gap.
Yeah. And the guy who created the concept, by the way, is become a friend of mine, right? I mean, he will tell you that he still goes in the gap every day.
Yeah.
Right? He just didn't stay there as long.
Yeah, I'm excited to have been on the show. That's had a big impact on me. I gave that book away, and then the 10X versus 2X had a really profound impact on me last year when I got away.
Yeah.
And you know, the other thing about that is the effect it has on people around you and the energy that it sucks from them. And I've been, you know, focused on that with our kids because I've kind of given that to them, and it sucks for me to look back and for them to see that like we're in this amazing place, we're doing this amazing things, and we're focusing on these small little things, and it's just so hard to turn those into positive things unless you just call it out. You know, like this is awesome. It would be cool if this and that, or you know, we would change this, but let's focus on the positivity.
Yeah,
you know?
like what's in the moment, like what can I just really, really appreciate that, and then from that, right?
Yeah.
Instead of like I'm not there, it could have been more. I could, you know, like that sort of like instead of trying to get somewhere that you're not, even when we were in really an amazing experience that you described.
Bush was about to talk.
Yeah.
We were going to go see him.
Yeah, we're like kicking field goals on the field.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it was insane, once in a lifetime or first lifetime type of an experience, right? And so like just having our minds taken away from that, you know, is again, we're stealing that joy, right?
Yeah, it's just it just robs the joy. So it's good to have folks around you that can slap you, gut punch you, and then you wake up and you look at it and you're like, yeah, what am I thinking?
Yeah. Well, I assure you
on?
that you know you're someone that would contribute that back to me, no problem. So I'm waiting for my slap.
I've tried to take that concept and you know steal from another Tony Robbins things of just turning that expectation into appreciation, and really have tried to do that with our kids because like Andrew's 15 and like he just doesn't. It took his friends out to the lake for like 5 15-year-olds, and him, so 6 of them together, and it was just like they don't have the capacity to like understand and follow directions and do simple stuff like shutting the doors or obey the rules. They just don't have the capacity.
Right.
And then getting my son around other kids, you realize that they're just not there yet.
Right.
And just saying, man, just your kid's awesome. Like your life's awesome. Whatever's awesome. Like change that, you know, expectation and appreciation. That's kind of helped me get out of the gap quicker. So, well, man, you know, I tell you, you know, we like to start just, you know, what your childhood was like, and that's kind of a generic question. But if you think about, you know, the concept of the show, like we want to go way back. Like we want to really think about like what had profound impacts, what beliefs were imprinted on you early on. So what was early on Steve Neuner life like?
Well, first of all, my diapers were entirely too tight. I'm just kidding. No, I mean, look. The story I'm going to tell like may sound that like it's like there's something wrong. So I want to start off by just saying like I have incredible parents who absolutely I believe love me and did the best that they could do. Okay, so since we're going back to that, born in Germany, kind of lived all over. But
military
early,
family,
it was military, and then like really my dad just kept getting remarried, and so every time we remarried, we'd move to where the new place. Love is a powerful thing. But early on, so it was my dad and my mom. We were all in Washington State when he got out of, you know, when we left Germany. And early on, my brother passed away. And I was really little, like I barely even have a memory of it. But it set off, it created a huge wound for my parents. I mean, I still can't even imagine with 3 kids of my own. I can't imagine what it'd be like if I lost one of my children. And I don't even want to imagine, right? I mean, it's just.
I don't think our minds are. You talk about a 15-year-old being capable of certain things. I don't think our minds are capable of understanding
conceiving that. Yeah.
And we're not supposed to.
Yeah.
And if God forbid something like that's happening, we'll have to deal with it because we just can't imagine.
Yeah.
Can't imagine.
And so you know, so that happened, and I think, you know, my parents were probably already struggling, and they had some other challenges going on. But my mom, you know, left. She left to go back to where she had grown up, like out Georgia, Alabama. And my dad, you know, pretty much became like a single parent overnight. Lost his wife, lost his son, and so he, you know, doing the best he could for us, just like really threw himself into work. And he, I think worked really hard. And I think also there was maybe something else there he was looking to fill because he was, dating and looking to get married and everything else. And so I just remember growing up, and I know this as a byproduct of actually doing a lot of work, but like I think growing up, I spent a whole lot of time trying to be like this perfect son, like a really, really good boy. And that really good boy was like, because I thought like, if every time my dad's relationship didn't work out or something else, there was always like this hope that he was going to like pay attention to me, right? Because I was there, I was always there for him. And, that wasn't the case. And my dad never once, I really believe he did the best he could. My dad never once said, I don't value you, you don't matter, you're not good enough, right? But thanks to the work I've done, I realized that I started to create my own story in the vacuum of that space, right? With him being gone, me being by myself a lot, like just trying to please him, right?
Probably some of the effects of your brother passing away and him.
And my mom was like intermittently around, but she was healing some big wounds, obviously herself, and so a lot of it, she was just gone, right? And so it was like new mom, dad, she's gone, like, and so it was just kind of this cycle, and so that like really became not good enough, and so that was like I said, I was unaware of it at the time, but that started, I think, to form some patterns, right? And there, it's not all like sad, right? So like one of the biggest blessings, and this might sound like not good on the onset, but during my dad's third marriage, he was really struggling with that marriage. He's trying to save it. She had kids, and I don't know the conversations they had, but basically, it seemed that I was like, she had convinced him that I was a problem in their marriage. And so she sent me to go live with she and my dad had sent me to go live with my grandparents, okay? And so my grandparents had remarried, but as far as I knew, it was my grandma, and he had always been my grandpa, because my earliest memories of having a grandpa was him.
It was your dad's dad?
It was my dad's stepdad and his mom, okay? But I was not his blood, right? And there were he was an entrepreneur, and there were many of the things that he was focused on. And while I give all the love to my grandmother, my grandpa really, really just did an incredible work in my life.
How old were you when you moved there?
So that was right when I was about 12.
Okay.
Yeah, 12, 13. Like I was going in there was junior high, here would have been middle school. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, and so I went up there, and I remember like feeling almost indifferent about it and not knowing what to expect. And then like, oh my gosh, my grandparents are going to be like kind of lame. And in a lot of ways they were lame, but in a lot of ways they were amazing.
Yeah,
okay?
You needed the lameness.
So, and again, like a lot of times during the friction of some of the relationship I grew up with, there would be stuff like, throwing stuff, lots of screaming, slashing tires, like just
love.
Yeah, like real strong, real strong emotion of love, right? And so with that, I didn't really know anything but that, right? And so living with them, it was just crazy because they disagreed, but they would resolve disagreement just like we're talking right now.
Calm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in fact, the one thing I remember they always disagreed on was the thermostat. And my grandpa would be like, if it solve the problem, I'll just walk around naked. And I'd be like, please, Grandpa, no, like
he
don't
wanted
do
it
that.
cooler?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's my parents. My mom, my dad wants it hot, my mom wants it cold.
Yeah. And so, but that was like that, and there were many other challenges, right? I'm joking, but that was the one persistent one, right?
Yeah.
And, he took me to work with them in the summer, and he had a technology company. What they did is they went to school districts, and back then it was VCRs, microfiche, all this cutting edge technology, right?
The TVs on the big
overhead
rollers.
projectors where you put the plastic on, and you write. So we'd go, and he had this Caprice station wagon, and we would go around central Missouri and go to these schools, and we'd pick up their equipment, and he'd bring them back to the shop, and they had technicians, and they would fix them or tune them up or whatever. And I remember if we'd meet with the superintendent of the school district, and we would meet he'd see the janitor. He treated everybody the same.
Yeah.
Everybody the same. He knew their kids' names. Like, he had a great memory, which I don't, but he was just really, really just so good, so present, and it was totally authentic.
Yeah.
Right? It wasn't like a trick or a sales trick or whatever. It's just how he was, right? And so it was just such a cool, and he never said, hey, watch how I treat people.
He just showed you.
He just treated people a certain way, right? And we'd go, and on the road, he's like a man of habit. So always McDonald's, and always the same order, and always, like, you know, always the people at the counter, like, always the same. And he was just, it was so good. And, you know, I learned to work. I learned, you know, this is like essentially my first job where I ever got paid to do something, right? And I had no idea. I would give all that money back times 1,000 for what I got from that whole experience and living with them.
When do you think that started? So you moved in with him when you were 12. Like, when did you start seeing the fruits of that? You mentioned that it's 35 years later and you're still seeing it, but like, when do you think where was the first time you realized, like, oh,
man, I didn't see it, but this goes to show anyone that doesn't think that like what we do at home matters with their kids. My grades went up while I was there, you know, like all this stuff from my lame grandparents, like they showed me love, right? My grandpa, I think we went to church a few times, but he never talked about faith or anything else. But he just literally, it's like, you know, speak the gospel at all times and when necessary use words. I never heard him use words, but he literally, I saw the guy like live the gospel, right? And so, but I had no idea. Like, I mean, I was too dumb and young to appreciate it. And so I didn't see the fruit of that, other than the fruit that you would see in a time like that to have a kid with some stability in their life, which was grades and stuff like that. But eventually that marriage didn't work out with my dad and his, you know, and that wife. And I ended up moving back with him. And
with your dad?
With him. And so.
And what age was that?
I mean, it was like a year. I spent like a year with him. It was like a magic moment. Yeah.
Okay.
It was just this real wonderful thing. Long enough to know that it was like totally real because it was like a year we lived together, but not so.
And to see another perspective on how life could be. It's not just this vacuum that I grew up in.
But I wasn't like like I'm able to talk about these things, but I wasn't, at that time, I just wanted to go skateboard and shoot baskets, right? Or whatever, right? And so, but again, the fruit was there. But I didn't see the kind of like what I described now. You know, I still had a whole lot of journey to go. There were still things that needed to happen in my life, and that soil needed to be, you know, sort of prepared for that seed to really be able to sprout. So it was just kind of laid there. And I came back and was with my dad, and it was kind of a different version, the same, right? So we're back in it together, and it wasn't all bad, but it was like wasn't all good, right? And I was alone a lot, and so. Did
you see and feel the stark difference from being in that environment with your grandparents?
And in fact, I mean, one of my struggles sometimes, you know, and it, like when I was processing all this now, I'm really grateful the way it all happened. But I remember as a kid at that point, like when my dad came to get me, I didn't want to leave. And I couldn't express why. I didn't really know why, but I also felt sad for my dad by himself, and I didn't want him to be alone. And so I remember as a kid, like, you know, 13-year-old kid, like, didn't really know how to process it. But I remember like not really wanting to leave, which is ironic because when I first went up there, I was like, oh, it's going to be lame with my grandparents. You know, they're never going to let me play Nintendo, right?
It's the devil. It's going to kill you.
Yeah. So.
Well, so what? So two entrepreneur really influence in your life. Your dad, your grandfather.
Yeah, and my dad's was like, I mean, he's the most resilient man I've ever met. I mean, like, you know, like as much as like all of this stuff I've said, like he continuously reboot and rebuilt himself. I often joke like he's the wealthiest guy I know if he had to divide his assets in half so many times, right?
That's true.
But it's like truly, like, you know, he is a fighter. I mean, he did multiple tours in Vietnam, and like, you know, he had a tough father, and like, so he just he has continuously found a way to through really tough stuff, right?
Yeah, and that's a trait that you know that probably imprinted on you too.
Sure.
I mean, of being resilient and
and
knowing that life's not perfect, and you know that there's just different parts of our life, and different circles, right?
And there's fruit from that, right? Like quite honestly, I mean, so I saw my grandparents. Certainly, I can point to that as like a really great model. Corey and I my wife, we just spent 21 years. We had our anniversary.
Congrats, 21 years, man.
Thank you.
That's a huge number.
She's my best friend. We ran and built businesses together. Like, you know, like we don't have a perfect marriage, but we have a really great marriage. Yeah. And so I can say I learned a lot of that from my grandparents. Like that's the freedom too. That's like part of what I saw in my grandparents.
But you had two stark contrasts.
But I had the opposite too. It's like, hey, I know this is the raw material for not like seemingly not good things, right?
Yeah, you wrote down that, you know, some of the biggest influencer people that you surround yourself with. But man, I'll tell you, picking the right partner is huge. There's so many. I mean, you look back at people that you just look at and you're like, man, that is wrong. It's a wrong pick. I mean, it's so important. I mean, as much as the 5 people that you surround yourself can influence your life, well, one of your spouse is one of the 5, and if you make a bad choice, that can be devastating to your life. And
look, I've seen. I mean, I've seen people like one of my best friends. I won't say he picked wrong, but he picked I mean, they've fought for it. Yeah. Right? And in all of that fighting, both of them, I would say, have really grown in a lot of really cool ways. Mm-hmm. Only that kind of friction can kind of create in your life, right? And so humility, perseverance, strength, like, you know, and it's exponentially better than it used to be. But I just remember when they first got married, I was like, oh my gosh, you know.
Looking back, you know, you look like the blocks of years, how they just different, and then marriage is a journey, and it matures, and it gets, you know, hopefully it gets better, and you learn from each other. And,
but they fought for it, you know, and a lot of people, like, I know many other people that would have like pulled that, but I think it's really, really cool to see people that will just like hang in there. You know,
and fight for it. Just give up.
Right? Hey, I made a real commitment and a vow, and I really want to honor that. Like, and no judgment. Obviously, like a lot of people in my family that you know have made other choices, but to me, it's inspiring to see people that really honor their commitments at that level.
Well, speaking of your 21-year marriage, your wife that you didn't want to meet in a bar, you ended up meeting in a bar. So how'd you and Corey meet?
Yeah. Friends of ours. I mean, the short answer is friends of ours got married, and we were both in the wedding, and so we met at the engagement party, right? But the sort of funny backstory about it is, you know, I didn't know if I was ever going to get married. You know,
were you like conflicted about it? Have you seen both sides?
Yeah, I just kind of was like,
it wasn't a priority?
Yeah, well, and I don't know. I mean, like, I didn't mind idealizing it, right? But I just didn't know that it would happen. Yeah. Right. And inherently, it was kind of funny. Inherently, I knew that I didn't want to meet my wife. If I was ever to get married, I knew that I didn't want to meet my wife in a bar.
You'd seen too much of that in Denton, Texas?
Well, yeah.
By the way, I didn't say we went to college together.
We went to college together,
yeah. You're talking about full circle. But you saw enough chance meeting in bars in Denton, you're like,
and look, let's be honest, it was about like why I would not have been equipped for that, right? And so it's funny. So inherently I knew that, and that was really a byproduct of some choices I made in my life. I'd had some just really incredible things happen in my life. I largely, even though my grandparents sowed some seeds, I lived most of my life with zero faith. Like, so I never saw, I kind of thought, I didn't know what I thought about God, right? Other than maybe he's like, if he did exist, he was like the big bully in the sky, right? I mean, and so I had some things happen throughout sort of the journey between meeting Corey and the journey as a kid.
We kind of skipped to that, but talk about that. 30 days in jail.
Yeah, well,
so scared straight.
Yeah, so coming home. Well, this is a big jump back. So coming home from my grandparents, and as everything sort of resumed, I was alone by myself, and so I ended up, making friends. And those friends, a lot of times, were the kids that were alone by themselves too. Their parents were professionals, busy, whatever, right?
And in that time frame, it was very common to just leave your kids at home.
Totally.
80s, late 80s, early 90s.
Totally. Had no idea what we're doing, right?
Yeah,
so we're cruising
no
all
tracking,
over, doing whatever.
no nothing.
Yeah. And look, so we were wild. I mean, we did a lot of like crazy stuff. I mean, and the thing is it didn't started with like friends, and then we, got in high school, and we started, we go to all these new houses were built in Plano, and so we go into the house during the daytime, and we would like pretend like my friends' parents who were doctors were going to buy them a house, and while they were talking to the guy, we'd sneak over and unlock a window, and we'd throw like a huge party at night, right? And so we'd throw a huge party like in these houses at night.
The model home?
Yeah, model home.
Nice.
And then so we would do that, and then we, and so we just like we were out sneaking out late at night and just doing stuff, and then I'm not proud of this. Eventually, it's like, oh, well, the window's open and there's a radar detector there, or oh, a bunch of CDs. Back then, people had all their CDs in like a binder. Someone would grab them, right? And eventually, that turned into more and more and more, and we were basically breaking into cars, and we got caught red-handed. Had a police officer come, put a gun to my head. Said, at the window, he said, "See this gun here?" He's like, "This is a .40 caliber Glock, and my finger's itching to pull the trigger," right? So, cuffed up, put in jail. I'm 17 years old, right? Called my parents, like the most terrifying moment of my life, to call my dad and like tell him that he had no idea, right, like the stuff we're doing, and largely he still thought I was like this perfect son, right? And so that just continued. That set off a chain of events that just really unraveled a lot in my life. It unraveled the fake relationship he and I really had, because we were pretty disconnected at that point. Total lack of purpose, total lack of direction. No one was evil or anything. We were just a bunch of dumb kids making really bad choices, and
together,
and then juicing each other and justifying it, like in our mind's eye.
That pack mentality.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so that, praise God, I went through this whole process. I didn't go to prom and any of that stuff. Like all through in high school, I was sort of invisible because I was dealing with this court stuff. And right when I graduated, I instead of a conviction, I was granted deferred adjudication, which is sort of like this, if you stay out of trouble, right? But as part of this deferred adjudication, I had to spend 30 nights in jail, like with adults and everyone else in jail. So it's like a scared straight program. And in the evening. So I was released during the day to work every night. But I'm 17 years old, right? I mean, it was freaky, right? So I'm spending that. And then released during the day. And I was working like 3 jobs at a time to try to pay off all my court costs. My dad was like, I'm not going to bail you out on this. So not totally, but like, a lot of it was my responsibility. So made my bed, lied in it. So we did that. I got 5 years deferred adjudication. I got 800 hours of community service.
What could have you got?
All kinds of restitution, all that stuff. I mean, I could have had a felony conviction, 4 counts of it on my record, which I don't.
And like years in jail.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Because during the 5 years, I had counseling. Even though there were no drugs involved, I've never done any drugs. I had to go to counseling for that too. And they would do constant drug tests and stuff. And it was all through college. Even when I knew you, there was this whole sort of like set of things that I was dealing with.
Because you had 5 years. Yeah, if you were 17, you were going through that during college.
Yeah. And so, in fact, I got like totally free from that and graduated at the same time, which was just like
the whole time in college.
Pretty much all through college.
Yeah, man, that pack mentality is a real thing. I mean, that's probably something that freaks me out most about my kids getting older. And I'm trying to explain that to Andrew. It's like, I trust the decisions you can make on your own, but when you get 5 other people around you and those 5 other people don't share your values, there's going to be bad decisions.
Yeah, and it's an echo chamber, right? And I didn't really have value. I mean, it's like I was kind of value agnostic, right?
Sure.
I mean, it was just like extremely probably just self-centered. So being a good boy was to try to get my dad's attention. And like I wasn't like a thoughtful, value-based person back then. I was just a kid sort of like just doing his thing, right? And so so the scared straight worked, right? And but the friends that I hung out with influenced it, but I knew enough to know what was right from wrong. Does that make sense?
I get it, but
Yeah.
it's hard for you at that age to go, hey guys,
Yeah.
This
Those are the only
is-
friends I had.
yeah, this is
I wasn't
wrong.
like captain of the football team.
I'm out.
you know?
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so it's really difficult. So
Yeah.
that idea of like the 5 people you surround yourself, your entire life
Makes a huge difference.
can make big impacts.
Huge.
So,
And so that scared straightness worked, and that became just a big pivotal point for me, right? So all through college, I busted butt. I took care of all my restitution, all my community service, like I fulfilled everything, you know. And I worked like 3 jobs and went to college, and I mean, and still found time to have a decent social life in college, right? So,
That's true.
So it was, you know, it was formative in a way because I learned to, you know, make things work. You know, made me really scrappy.
Yeah.
And then so that like led to, you know, eventually some success in business, right? And then so probably the other thing that leads to the Corey thing, the big transformation was, you know, when I got, for lack of a better term, you know, I had a real transformation, right? So I had a change in behavior because that wasn't working. I didn't want to be in jail. I'm going to be different, and so I'm not going to do any. So I'm like, still to this day, like I don't like, oh, we ended up with something extra in the grocery bag. We're going back in or paying it, returning. We're going back up there, right? Like I like that, like zero,
tolerance.
right?
Yeah.
But it wasn't. It was still at that time. Just I didn't want to ever live in that life or end up in that spot, right?
Yeah.
But as I continued to apply different habits, you know, life got better, right? And business was going better. And I ended up, I was in a period of even though things were going well, there was still something sort of missing for me.
Yeah.
Right. And so I was, you know, starting to search, starting to explore some of those things. And during that exploration, one night, you know, I was out.
This is still in college?
No, this is post-college.
Post-college,
yeah. I was out, and there was a, you know, we had season tickets to the Mavs, so I was at a Mavs game. I went out, and I went to, you know, Uptown, basically, after the game, and met some friends. You know, I'm still single. And while I was out, I got into an altercation with a guy who carjacked me, put a gun to my head, and took my truck. And the truck, you know, was my dad's, actually. I was moving into a house that I had just bought, my first rental house in Frisco. It was supposed to be short-term, my first rental house. And I had to go up there. I just bought it, closed on it, had all the paperwork, keys in the car, had the locks changed. And so I was preparing to go get it ready because I was going to move 2 roommates in with me, right? So anyway, get carjacked, go up, and I start you know, after we get our car back and everything else, I go up there and start getting the house ready for my friends. And so,
well, I mean, you just kind of breezed over that. So what was that? I mean, what was that like? Was that a quick altercation?
No.
What was that like? Gun to your head? Second time you had a gun to your head?
Yeah.
One with a cop, one with somebody trying to carjack you. What was that like? I mean, that's a serious deal, man.
Yeah. I'm lucky to be here. Let's put it that way, because I was still at a part in my life where like I still to this day struggle with people telling me what to do, right?
Yeah.
So it all started with him telling me I couldn't park my car somewhere. And I told him, but it was on the street, and I'm like, why can't I park here? And he's like, oh, well, you know, and so I didn't realize like a whole like ruse to get me to go back to my car because I had walked off from my car. And I was like, and so we got into the altercation, and there's a lot of F-bombs and everything else, and you know, and I was like, well, this is BS. But because it's my dad's truck, I didn't want my dad's truck to get messed up. So I actually went, and I was like, fine, you know, this is
bullshit.
So, I don't know what here.
That's all right.
It's EO audience, right? I said, this is bullshit. This is a fucking bullshit, is what I said.
Yeah.
And I got in the car, and I was starting to close the door, and he ran up, and he goes, no, this is bullshit. He's like, you're gonna give me the keys, or I'm gonna fucking kill you, right?
So you didn't get you to the spot. You just did it on
It all had escalated,
Yeah.
and I got in the car to move it because I was like, gosh, it'd just suck if he tears up my dad's car, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm getting in the truck, closing the door, and then that happens. And then not thinking in the moment, just a reaction, I pushed him, right? Ooh. And so then like I go back, because I just felt the gun in my, right? And then I pushed him, and then I saw the gun. And then at that point, I was just like, here you go, dude. Yeah. And then he put me down on the ground, gun to my head. And he jumped the car, drove off, and it was like a movie. I ran out in the middle of the street, knocked Henderson, and like waved everybody down. I said, you see that car? It's like, follow him. I just got carjacked. And it was minutes later, the cop showed up. And I was like, wow, that was fast. I didn't know that,
Yeah.
And they said, well, we don't know what you're talking about. We're here to report there's shots fired, reported shots fired. And so I don't know if it's the same guy or not, but in my mind, could have been.
Man. And you end up getting the car back or
got the car
gone,
back. That was a whole deal. Yeah. I mean, like I don't want to. I'm really grateful for what police do. I'm super grateful. The car got reported by apartment complex. Like, hey, you want to get this car? And we're like, yeah, it was a car stolen. So they called the police and they took down the impound. And we got down there. He had robbed like 7 other people in the car, and they were like, just fingerprints everywhere, used condoms in the car, like just all kinds of stuff, right? And they were like, was this stuff yours? Like they had done no effort. They were just glad they got the car back and I wasn't dead, and they had bigger fish to fry is the way I took it.
So you want to talk about transformational experiences. What changed there in that moment when he drove away and you were alive?
So nothing in the moment other than fear. Like it created a weird sense of like I was hyper vigilant for a while, like aware of anyone and everywhere, like anywhere I was at, I was like totally paranoid about what was going on. I mean, if someone comes up and like begged for money in the gas before that night, I would have been like, for a while, like someone pulled it up and asked for help, to my window, I would be like ready to, and it was just a weird deal. But I
guess what changed when you realized you're happy to be alive, and like what was that major transformation?
At first, I went on, right. So then I moved into I didn't move in the house. I went and started getting the house ready to move my friends in, right. So I'm up there at night, and this is crazy to even talk about because like it will sound so made up to someone, right? But this is what happened, okay? Everyone can make up whatever story they want about it, but this is what happened. So I'm up at night, late at night. I had a rescue black lab with me. Her name was Sky, and we're up there, and I was tearing down floral wallpaper. I got a good deal in the house because this little old lady owned it, and I'm like tearing down this floral wallpaper, getting it ready for my roommates. And I'm up there late at night. It's just me, and I had the locks rechanged, right? So I'm up there working on this. And my dog starts going absolutely berserk, right? And it was a split floor plan, so I'm in the master bathroom, like tearing down wallpaper. On the opposite of the house, there's 2 guest bedrooms, right? And so I'm like, oh gosh, like this is it. That guy's here. Like, I was still in that weird paranoid zone, right? So I'm like, this is going down. So I grab a hammer because I got nothing else, and I'm sitting there like, all right, mother effer, I'm, like.
You thought it was a guy that carjacked you?
I thought it was the guy that carjacked me, right?
So fear was there.
Yeah.
Like,
so I'm
from
like.
uptown to Frisco, you
so
thought
I'm like,
that was a guy.
like just like I'm ready to go, like hoping that he would be scared, but no, I didn't know. I was scared. I had the hammer, and I go across. I leave the, out the master bathroom, through the bedroom, start to walk in the living room. My dog's like, rah, rah, rah. I don't know what she's barking at, but she just doesn't do it. She's like, rah, hair standing up on the back of her neck, and I mean. She's looking into one of the rooms. So I was just like, here it goes, right? And so I go around the corner, and in the center of one of the bedrooms, because we hadn't moved in yet, is a Bible laying dead center in the middle of this room. Just there. I'd been in the house. There had been nothing in the house. Nothing. The only thing in that house was my tools. I'd had the locks rekeyed. Once, carjacked, and the guy got away with all my stuff, right?
And again.
And my address, and then again. So it'd been rekeyed twice by a locksmith. Okay? So I had no idea how this got in there. And it wasn't like glowing and it was like, oh, like voice of God. It was like just a Bible sitting in the middle of this room. And I honestly was just relieved. I was like, oh gosh, man, okay, she was barking at the Bible, chill out, right? Yeah. And so anyway, I don't even think about it, right? But I did over the next couple weeks. I started like, hey, like I knew there was no way, but I was still like, hey, and I was afraid to say anything, but I was like, hey, have you all been up to the house? Like, is there any, and my roommates that I was living with that were supposed to move up in there with me, no idea. My dad, no idea. And so anyway, like, life goes on, right? I'm just doing my thing. But that same Bible, I don't know why or how or whatever, but I started opening it for the first of my life. And I started reading it, and I started reading about Jesus and the things he said in his life. And like, for the first of my life, I've been exposed a little bit, my grandparents a little bit as a kid, like I've been exposed a little bit to like religion, but like, and I didn't realize how much I'd seen actually the gospel live with my grandpa, but I'd never really like processed or connected that. And it just, man, it just really, really hit me. And I started just feeling like that like the way I've been living my life just didn't make sense, right? And it was a few weeks after that. I can't tell you, most people can tell you the exact date or whatever, but it was in that room. I got on my knees in the same spot where the Bible was, and I literally said, Lord, take me, like whatever you want, I'm yours. And it's nothing's been the same since. Wow. And not that I've arrived or anything like that, but literally my heart changed. Things that I really, really cared about and were important to me, and things that really motivated me no longer motivated me. There were things that I wanted or thought I liked and enjoyed and previously really enjoyed, and they were like sort of part of me, like this identity, and I felt like I was supposed to lay some of those things down, and I did, and it felt super sacrificial, and really I felt like it was a real testing of my faith, like stuff that you would say if I told you, it'd be like, I had hundreds and hundreds of like gangster rap, like the dirtiest of dirty. I could every song to Eazy-E, every word, right? I mean, on a loop, but I just felt like wasn't supposed to feed my mind with that anymore. And because a lot of that in those movies and stuff was like, that's the stuff I was listening to when I was breaking into cars, and I was like, F you, and we're doing that. And so like just little by little, I started laying these things down, and at the time, that was a big sacrifice. Now there's these great Christian rappers and all this stuff, but Christian rap back then, it's like, oh, dude, just terrible, right? And so I was just, it felt like big time sacrifices. And so little by little, but what I can tell you is the set of transformations that have gone off of this day, it has been the greatest adventure I've ever been on. The most entrepreneurial thing I've ever done is try to seek what I believe is God's will and try to live that out even when it's not what I want. And it's led me on all kinds of crazy adventures. And so that, of course, led to a lot of changes over a period of time, and still more to come, I'm certain of it. Nice.
So what was your first, you got out of college, you had a job?
Yeah, no. Well, so that led to Corey. That was that was a huge divergence. But Corey, right? So Corey would have had nothing to do with me, who I was before that relationship, right? Not because she's some judgment or whatever, but she just knows that the significance of marriage and who you have in your life, and she knew about the friend thing, right? Yeah. And so anyway, I had a lot of change, but I still had from college and stuff had a reputation, right? And so we met at our friend's engagement party. We were both in the wedding, and we met at a bar, which is really hilarious because I had been going to a church, a really big church. Even before the Bible thing happened, I'd explored it a couple times, but I was going to explore it because I knew if I was ever going to get married, I didn't want to meet my wife in a bar.
Right. So you were going to church.
I was going to check out girls. I was going to church to check out girls with my buddies, right? But not really. And so I joke, right? I went to church, right? It just shows God's sense of humor. I went to church to get what I want, which was a great woman in my life, right? Instead, I got what I needed, which was a relationship with Jesus for me, right? And then the humor of God, only then could I meet my wife in a bar because their engagement party was at Humperdinck's in Addison, right?
Nice. Okay.
And so anyway, so we met at a bar. But 21 years, best friend, great.
Yeah,
So,
that's awesome.
Sorry for the long divergent story.
No,
there,
it's
but
all.
yeah.
I mean, again, that's we talk about these little things that
Yeah.
you may forget along the way, and these
Yeah.
things pop up.
Yeah.
Because if you look at that story, if you didn't do this, if you didn't do that, if you didn't do this, you wouldn't be where you are today.
100.
You know,
right?
I mean, if your dad would have been perfect.
Yeah.
If you wouldn't live with your grandparents, right?
Yeah.
If you weren't hanging out with the hoodlums, you know,
Yeah.
popping locks in model homes, you know, it
It
all.
was first entrepreneurial venture. I mean, like if you look at it, like that was one of my first businesses.
Yeah.
I mean, because we're selling stuff to like pawn shops and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, like it was like organized, and it was. I had a job and stuff, and it was like I was making so much more money than what I made at my like job.
Yeah.
And yeah, but I had a weak purpose and in a weak community, and not a judgment of those people because they're all different people now too. But
Yeah.
like at the time, it was the blind leading the blind, right?
Yeah. So what was your first entrepreneurial gig out of college? Out of college, did you have a job, and then or
I had
did you
one
go straight
job.
into it? You had one? Okay.
Yeah, I had one job, and it was
What
a
was your
great
one?
job.
Yeah.
I worked at ADP,
Okay.
selling payroll and HR outsourcing, and it was a great job, great training, everything else. I did pretty well at it. I should have known, I just didn't see it at the time that I was an entrepreneur even then, because I was. One of the ways that I actually made quota, because the two prior people had been like fired before me for not making quota, because they put me in Denton, which you remember how podunk Denton was back then? That was my territory.
Oh, wow.
I'm like, why are everyone else gets downtown Dallas? I get this like podunk. I'm like, well, you went to college there. I'm like, well, that doesn't help me.
Yeah, they're all gone.
But as I was talking, I was getting rejected constantly, cold calling, everything else. What I realized was they were all doing payroll, not with another payroll company. They're doing it with their CPAs. And so then I started talking to CPAs, and I'm like, hey.
They don't want to do that.
They hate
They
it.
hate it.
They hated it, right? And so I basically, this was where we're at in technology at the time. They had a Windows thin client that would go on your computer, and you could type it in on your Windows, and it'd transmit to ADP. And so I convinced them, like, could we discount the payroll if we could sell like 80 at a time? Like go to a CPA firm, take all their 80 clients, and then they could charge whatever they wanted for a service. We would private label it. Instead of it saying ADP, it would say their CPA firm's name on it, right? Or the client's name or whatever.
Yeah.
And so anyway, so that's how I made quota there, right? And I did well. And then the politics of ADP at the time, they got a lot better after I left. I had a lot of friends that are even still there, had great careers there. But I just, it wasn't for me. Like it was like, well, this promotion's open, and then I was like, well, you had told me when I took the job that if I did well, X, Y, and Z, that I would get that. And they're like, yeah, I send these other people there because they're lower performers, and I wanted to get them off our team or whatever. And I'm like, ugh, no,
Roles
thank
in
you.
politics.
Yeah.
You didn't like it. Yeah.
So
I agree.
So then that led to a whole nother set of journeys.
Well, so what was the first entrepreneur journey, and what was the first gig that you knew that, okay, I'm not working for anyone else. This is what I'm meant to do.
Yeah, the first one where I knew that, so I left, and I'll keep this one as short as I can because there's not a lot of there, but I joined like me, my dad, and another partner. We had like a sales organization. We were selling payroll and HR outsourcing solutions, kind of like what I did at ADP, but brokering it. So we had a lot of different things going on. And for a number of reasons, my dad got married again. He tried to insert her in the marriage. They were having conflict. 9/11 happened. It got really, really messy. Not really, but so much between my dad and I, not so much, but like him and the other partner. And it was just, and I had no buy, there was no buy sell. It was like this, like when it was going great, we were going to own the world. And then when it wasn't, it's like I felt all this pressure to like be the responsibility for growing it, and no one was really aligned. Yeah. And so I walked away from it, and I walked away from my equity, and went through a mini depression, went back to North Texas, almost became a dentist, and started volunteering in a dental office, and realized all I could think about was getting to 5 dental practices so I didn't have to practice dentistry. And so I went home to Corey, and I was like, hey, I know you've been supporting me. We were living off her school teacher salary. And like, I know you've been supporting me. I can't go to dental school. And so I didn't know what I could do. So I bought a list of a couple thousand businesses here in Dallas, made business cards with my brother-in-law, and started cold calling, begging for meetings, and selling insurance. And so a few people said yes, and that eventually grew, as you know. I mean, it grew into something pretty significant.
That, you started off brokering ADP stuff, and now you went into brokering insurance.
Yeah.
When was your first year?
Started with $800.
$800.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, we made our own business cards, right?
Yeah,
but
sure.
I mean, yeah, it was mostly in just the list and the data. And that, I'd cold call, and that was back in the day, you'd like fax. Like if someone hung up on me or wouldn't answer, I'd fax them something. Like, hey, did you get the fax? Yeah. Or I'd go in a building like this, and I'd start on like the 15th floor, and then go to the 4th floor, and then the 7th floor, and then the 2nd floor. So I could try to go door to door as many times as I could before the security guards ran me out. Because people will be nicer to you. Like if you ever have to cold call face to face, people are way nicer than on the phone. They're just
It's hard.
Now no one answers the phone.
Yeah,
but,
it's harder to say no to somebody, especially when you're not, nice guy. What? So that was the start of the insurance company.
That was
right?
the start of the insurance business.
In what year?
I'm terrible with this stuff, but like maybe 03?
03?
08? No. Yeah, around 03, I think.
Yeah. Sometime before 09.
Awesome. Yeah.
Who got you? So you had a good stretch. I guess not in EO.
Yeah.
Right? And so I started my first business in 04, and I joined EO I think in 2010. So I had a pretty good stretch too. But who told you about EO, and how were you introduced to it?
Ooh, this is sort of interesting. This is not.
It's always a good story.
It's not flattering at first, right? So I had this friend. I had these friends, and we were like close, right? And this just goes to show, like we're never arrived. We all got stuff going on in life, anything else, and there's like I'm not judging here, right? But we had this group of friends, and we were like doing Bible studies and everything else. And this one friend of ours, his business was like way ahead, right? And I really admire him. He's just like this incredible guy, and he had, lake house on Cedar Creek Lake. We go out and spend time with them as families, and like our wives were friends. We just like a group of us were all sort of doing life together. Yeah. And he joined EO with his business, and I don't know that EO was it at all, but and certainly we all make our own choices. But like through that, like all of a sudden, shortly after, like within a year, found out he'd been having an affair. She was pregnant. Like all this stuff. Like this guy that like we all thought we knew really well, like had this whole other life, and a lot of it was happening like in his forum with confidentiality and everything else. And so it was like that was my first impression of EO, and I was like, not for me, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, we know that that's not it, or what the case, or whatever. But anyway, it's sad. I stayed friends with him and try to work through him. He's still figuring his way, right, as we all are. But that was my first impression. So I thought not EO, but continue to grow the business. A big part of me forever just always saw myself as a servant to, like in service to entrepreneurs. I never saw myself as an entrepreneur. I saw myself as like an insurance salesperson.
Yeah, and if you look at the ADP insurance, you're serving people that are in business.
But I never saw myself as an entrepreneur. It's just like I served people, right? Mm-hmm. And then I loved insurance because one, I could start with $800, and so like the only way I knew I could, start a business. But then two, I could be independent, and I didn't have to just cram Blue Cross down someone's throat. There were options to do what's right for people. So that fit with me, and it was a great way. And I like people, and it's a people business.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so we were able to build that. But I lost my path there.
Just EO. When did you get reintroduced? Reintroduced to
I ended up joining Strategic Coach.
First.
Okay. Right? A friend of mine who's now in EO, I introduced him to EO. He introduced me to Coach. Kenny Painter, he's a Dallas chapter member. Yeah. I watched a guy join Strategic Coach, and in a period of about 3 years, I watched the guy like double his income and work about half the time. And I remember he was in financial services and insurance. We're kind of the same. But I knew him from college. I was like, okay, he's a little better looking than me, and he's a little smarter. I was like, but if I can get half the results he got, it'd still be worth it. So I joined Coach. And Coach was like, it started helping me, like Dan Sullivan's frameworks, gap in the game, even the stuff we talked about, started really rewiring my mind. And for the first time, I really saw myself as an entrepreneur. Business really grew, really flourished. And through all that, I was hiring private coaches. Like my whole like mindset around all that just really changed. So one of my private coaches that I had at the time was like, hey, you know, back to I had these friends, like your community, like you're, you know, you've got these friends and everything else, but like your business is really growing now, and you need to be around some people that have some bigger businesses, and so that you can like learn from people's experiences, because that's what you enjoy. So I was like, well, what should I join? They're like, well, definitely don't join EO. Like, I'm like, what do you mean don't join EO? And they're like, well, you don't belong there. And I'm like, what do you mean I don't belong there? They're like, well, it's, they knew this person too, right? And so I think maybe it biased them a little bit, but they were like, you're more of a conscious capitalism type. And I'm like, I'm joining EO, screw that, right?
You just told me something I shouldn't do. Yeah.
So,
maybe he knew you really well as a coach.
Yeah, she did. She did.
She laid that
was a
up for
Jedi,
you.
so I wouldn't put it past her. So I ended up joining EO, and it was, I mean, we could go through that whole journey, but it was amazing, transformative, in a lot of really cool ways. But that's how I found, and of course it wasn't that, right? And I had like an incredible form of some of truly the best human beings I ever met, who wouldn't even, they'd fight themselves to even take a second look at a pretty girls. They were so faithful to their wives, right? So just because it was that one experience wasn't like all of EO, right?
It's not the case.
It's never that way.
Yeah.
Same thing with church or anything else.
Yeah. So what were some of your fun? I mean, form is, well, I think was a big part of your EO experience. But what was some of your fondest memories of EO?
All of them are related to people, right? I mean, like, to just have all these incredible, like, infinite number of memories, to the point where you could almost, like, value it. I mean, it's just like, there was just bam, 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 bam. But I mean, certainly first forum retreat was incredible, right? Like, just like this was.
I saw you I went to Pause Up.
Pause
so
Up.
We're looking at that for our retreat. Is it worth it?
I mean,
is it awesome?
I'm not the same person I was then, but the guy that had, like, you know, flew Spirit Airlines, and then the next day got on, my format had a jet at the time. He's very generous, and so like flew on a private jet to this Pause Up place where the old 97s played, like private concert, and celebrity chefs were there, like, and the person from this TV show, like, it was like, I was like, what? This is
what
crazy.
Just happened?
It was oil, right? And it was like my first experience all the way around. And so, yeah, like, it was just inevitably, and so while I remember all that, and that's why I'm describing it, I remember some of the incredible conversations we had when my friends, we had this celebrity chef thing, and I eat like a kid, and they realized, like, we had spent, like, you know, $200 at the time. This is a while ago. This is even more money, right? On a plate of food that I didn't eat hardly anything of, and so we all, like, they convinced the chef to make me a hamburger, and we're all hanging around there watching me. And we're all eating hamburgers.
Meat, cheese, and bread only.
Yeah, meat, cheese, bread only. Used to be ate with me. And so anyway, like, but all those like moments, right, that of just that connection, that community, being surrounded by people that aren't like me, that had divergent thought and were really strong and smart in their own right, and that were like sharpening my best ideas and inspiring new ones that I never even considered. I mean, like, that was incredible. So you have that, you've got.
You served on the board, all the way up to the president board on
president of the chapter.
President of the chapter. And what year was that? I know it's bad with years. Back then.
Yeah.
You, Casson.
Yeah. Terry Pham was.
And Pham.
Pham was the president before me. I was president-elect, and then Ryan Casson. And so it was a year, because Casson was president year of COVID. So what year was COVID?
2020.
Yeah, so then.
So he was the last. So this was
2019, I guess, then, for me.
And I remember that. Like, y'all did a really good job, that group, because y'all both were in form together.
Yep.
Right? You, Terry, and Casson.
Casson wasn't yet. I don't
yet.
think I remember. I'm getting a terrible timeline, but I think he became around that time or right after.
I think it was a really cool time in the chapter because, you know, in any volunteer organization, you've got, and especially being an entrepreneur, you've got different ideas just coming and going, bam, 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 and y'all put together like a really good 3-year vision that gave the chapter some consistency, right? And had a good succession plan. And I just remember that I was on the board Casson's year, I think learning chair, or no, 19 and 20 I was learning chair.
Yeah.
And so it was really cool to see, like, we had a theme, we had things planned out for the next 3 years. So y'all did a really good job of doing that and seeing the opportunity, because you look to the past and you see how things just, it's like a knee-jerk reaction, typical entrepreneur, right?
Sure.
I mean, just knee-jerk reaction. You've got good momentum going, and then the incoming comes in, and you're like, oh, what happened to all this?
Yeah.
And so I think it was a really good phase for the chapter to have 3 y'all
so good
presidents back to back.
So good, and like so many shout outs could go, like I could go on, but I have a big shout out to Terry Pham, and then Jessica Nunez was also like a big part of it, but like just getting and others, but just like getting together and aligning on a vision that we were willing to see for a period of time out was really, really powerful, and saved our butt, because Reagan was going to be president, not me. Yeah. And then he had some stuff come up, and then so like I was going to be his elect, and then I ended up being president. And part of the reason why I feel like that was able to happen the way that it did was because, and later in the game, was because there was a vision, everyone was aligned on it, right? So it actually, I think, created continuity for the chapter in a cool way. And then also, honestly, it ended up working out really great, because one of my favorite things that happened that year was we did our first all-chapter retreat for Dallas ever, and it was like it was new. Not everyone loved it. Maybe some people still don't, but I mean, it was like the first time.
Finally, we've been talking about it for so many years.
Forever. That's what was driving me crazy, because like me, like in all of my profiles, like I like completion, and so it's just like this. Why do we just keep talking about it?
Let's just do it.
Yeah.
And I think Reagan was a good person to come during that time and just like, let's go. We're doing it.
Totally.
Like, give me the budget. Let's figure it out. We're going to do it.
Him and I actually put a lot into it too, but he really killed it, right? And so while he couldn't, he had things that president wasn't right for them. That wouldn't have happened without like him, and he was a perfect guy to bring that alive.
Absolutely.
And a lot of it was his vision.
Yeah, and it's still
part of our overall vision, but that was part of like the.
I think we're 5. They just did Punta Cana, and then I think he's been doing it for 5 years.
I love that. That's so cool.
It's been really cool to look back and
I still hear
that
incredible memories made whenever I see people and they tell me about the ones I haven't been to. I'm like, it's really cool. Like, man, that's just.
And it's gotten better. Unfortunately, I hadn't been able to go to them, but I remember the first one with, in the George Bush suite, the parties and DJing the late nights, but then all the great content that we had. I remember the first one. It was Christy with the breath work. And so it's like the first
with no shoes, walking around and like making up songs on the fly. I mean,
and so someone coming into that, I'm sure there was some skepticism.
I was skeptical, but it was like there was tons of connection that year.
It was, and it was
brought
just
the chapter together.
It was just getting people in an uncomfortable situation, something that's new and maybe weird, but like everybody came together.
People sharing rooms, and there were people pissed about that. But in the end, I think everyone was like, "That was cool."
That was cool. Yeah, you just got to get into the unknown and know that you're with your people and you're surrounded by people that are going to love and support you and be vulnerable with. And so it was a great tradition that started. I'm excited to see where it keeps going.
So many memories made through that, right? The late night party, the this, the that, right? GLC, great memories made there. Incredible board of people that served that year. I mean, it was a real formative thing for me, because I had, never led such incredible leaders. And honestly, like, I don't know, so one of the things I get to do now is I lead workshops for strategic coach.
It's really interesting you talked about that, you didn't see yourself as an entrepreneur, you see yourself serving entrepreneurs, and that's what you're doing now in a huge way.
Yeah.
I mean, you had a big impact on me on getting into coach, and the timing wasn't great for me and just the way it worked out. But I mean, I still use tools from it today. In fact, the superpowers that you and Ron started, we can talk about that a little bit, but I had a checkup call. I put my assistant into that program, and it was the first kind of checkup call I had with Amber, and it was so great. And I can see the influence of coach, of EOS, of EO, and just the way that y'all structure that business is really cool. And again, you're serving entrepreneurs.
Well, I spent my whole life doing that one, and that's a funny story, because that's really almost like just a crazy accidental business in a way. I mean, we just stumbled into that one. I mean, the quick story on it is like while I was in EO, like, you know, people reach out from Forum or people reach out for different things. Because I was membership before, so I'd run into people. And all the times, like, I would go and sit down with someone and like think about joining a chapter, and they'd be like, hold on, I'm going to talk about EO, but like, tell me about Fern. It was like my assistant at the time, right? Like, she's amazing, right? Like, what is she doing?
Yes.
A ton of things she did, and for, you know, like our teamwork, and people would be like, wow, right? And they're like, I want a Fern, and I would just say, hire someone, and she can come shadow. Yep. They can come shadow. Fern would love it, and so they would sit with a Fern for a couple days and watch how we work together, and that was their training, right? Yeah. And so it was just really sweet, and she loved it, and I loved it. And then I started realizing some entrepreneurs, it wasn't just training the assistant. Like, we had to train the entrepreneur to actually work with the assistant, because if you treat someone a certain way, you're going to get a certain result. Yep. And if you diminish important work, people are going to feel diminished. And so, so anyway, so that was kind of happening. And then Ryan Casson was one of the first people that was like, I want a Fern. And so he was joined coach. And so he wanted, like, and so Amber, who's now our chief happiness officer, was his assistant. And she came, sat with Fern. And so between Ryan and I, we probably trained, I don't know, north of 20 entrepreneurs assistants for free. And we had people offer us money, and we would, no.
Just figuring out the process.
And then, but we didn't know it. We were just serving, serving people. And then at a Forum retreat, because we were in Forum, later on, we were in Telluride, and he was frustrated with the politics and everything else, and I'm not bringing any kind of confidentiality. He was frustrated, and we started talking about it, and then like that was the birth of it. And I was still in the insurance business, so we sort of did some initial like formulation, and him and Amber really ran and took what Fern had done and what Amber then ran with, and they created a lot of it, and I was the first customer. So Fern was so busy with our growth, because the insurance business was going like a rocket at the time. I needed extra support, so I was the first. I'm not just the hair club for member.
You're also a client.
I'm also a client.
Well, it's been cool to see that progression too, because we worked to try to find somebody. I wanted somebody remote.
Yeah.
I mean, I want somebody in person.
Yeah.
And so, but I think Laura's been in the program for about a month and a half now, and I've seen a change. I've seen a difference. So it's
sweet.
It's awesome.
Yeah,
so,
man. Thanks.
Well, so you did have an exit from.
We've got a big book coming out, by the way.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So Shannon Waller, head of Team Success, your Team Success podcast. We did a podcast series with her that was so well received that we were talking together, and we decided to create a book. So we have a book coming out later this year called Superpowered. Nice. And so if you don't ever want to use superpowers, but you want to know how to have a superpowered assistant, you already have one and you love them and you want to have that, it's going to be the whole book is centered around value creation.
Well, just the program that Laura's been in for the last month, I've seen a change. I can imagine being the book. I mean, y'all are delivering a huge amount of value.
Sweet.
So
thanks, man.
So you did eventually have an exit out of your insurance business, and now you're just doing something.
I'm not even licensed anymore.
No more. Wow, you hung it up.
So hard to get all these licenses and designations and everything else.
You want to keep them just in case, like you're out.
Man, it was funny. Even as I was coming down to it, I had a guy come to me and said, "Hey, look, I want to, do what you did. Like, I'll give you equity. Will you come sit on our board and blah blah blah?" And I just thought about, prayed about it, and I very much had 10x is easier than 2x. And Ben in that book, if you haven't read it, you already brought it in the room. Yeah. He talks about the 20%, right? And then he talks about a lot of its identity shifts, right? It is a lot of the 10x, right? And it's letting go of the 80 so you can focus on the 20, and so for me, insurance was so wonderful for me. I mean, I learned leadership, I learned to build a business. I don't know that I could be the coach I was either, but for business, because think about it, we served a whole bunch of different types of companies. Yeah. So I was under the hood of all kinds of companies around the Dallas, you name the industry, and I'm a nerd for it, so I love that. And so I understand business models quickly because I just got trained because when you insure it, you got to know how they work, right? What's the risk? Right. And so all of that was so wonderful, but when I really reflect on it, I was like, it's not a part of my future. And so, I let go of it. It was so kind of surreal a little bit because I mean, if I just got a couple more years too, you get like grandfather because I'd been an insurance agent for a long time.
Oh yeah.
But I was just like, I'm not supposed to.
Let it go.
And so I've stepped into. I mean, I'm a coach. I want to live, walk the talk. So it's like it's not. I'm not holding on to safety nets. You know.
It's hard to let things go, man. So what does the future look like? Tell us about what you've got going up in McKinney and north of McKinney, like way north of McKinney.
Yeah, but you've been out.
I have been out. I mean, it'd be great if you could get a chopper to bring us back and forth because that hour drive is rough.
Well,
it was awesome, though.
We have people doing limos now.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good idea.
Coming up, like getting friends and just coming up in the limo and coming back.
But tell us about Barnhill. Tell us the way that whole thing came about. It's been very interesting too. But tell us what you're doing up there and what the future looks like for you.
Yeah.
For
What part do you want first? You want how it happened or what we're doing?
Give me an abbreviated version of how it happened.
Okay. Abbreviated
Because
version.
I think it's crazy.
Yeah. So abbreviated version. So we had the exit. I'm investing in real estate, right? Passive stuff. Yeah. We totally remodeled the house. Everything's done. I'm doing passive investments. And I'm looking on LoopNet and I see a beautiful property, right? And I'm like, there's no way that's in Dallas. And it's a concert venue. I'll kill two birds with one stone here. A vineyard, a concert event center, and they're doing live music. And it's just stunning. And there's a house on the property. It's 40 acres just north of McKinney. And it's stunning. It's in a valley, creeks around three sides, sunsets. I mean, it's totally just a unique place.
Like no way this is in Dallas.
Horses and
Hill
donkeys.
country maybe, but
yeah.
it's
and
beautiful.
in fact, that's what I thought it was. I was like, oh, this is false advertising. I'm looking at it. And as I'm going through looking at the property, there's a seller's disclosure at the bottom. And the bottom, I click on the seller's disclosure and it says the typical stuff like roof replaced in, 08 and blah, 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 right? And I look and it's like, why am I selling? All right? And it says, this may sound crazy to you, but I'm a Christian, and my wife and I have aging parents, and I keep having this recurring dream that we're supposed to go take care of our aging parents. My wife and I are aging parents. And I don't know if I'm supposed to or not, but this is just an act of obedience. And I went and I was like, oh my gosh, I showed Corey, okay? And remind you, this is our totally remodeled house that we have restored as our dream home.
Yeah.
Even the closets were like custom built, right? We had custom mirror frames for our mirrors, right?
Everything.
Exactly
the way you wanted it.
Just the way I wanted it. We're never gonna move. Passive, just enjoy, no work, right? And so anyway, I show Corey this play and I'm like, she's like, wow, that's really beautiful. And I'm like, yeah. I said, but don't look at that. Look at this. And I showed her, his name's Dean. I showed Dean's testimony, why he was selling. And she's like, wow. And I was like, yeah, he scared off half his buyers. The guy's either crazy or he's the real deal. And I was like, I want to meet him. She's like, you want to buy it, don't you? And I'm like, well, maybe. She's like, we're not buying it. And so anyway, we go out there. He's an entrepreneur. He had owned a printing company. He led worship in a church for free forever. The printing company went away eventually. He became the music pastor. And so he had this music background and the venue took off, right? And so we ended up, to make the long story short, we ended up buying it. And there were about 100 stories I could tell, why. Yeah. I will just share the most profound one, I guess, just to save everyone. But the story of my dad. So my dad gets a terminal lung condition, right? He's got two lungs. Guy did multiple tours of Vietnam. We've talked about his life a lot, and he's just a resilient fighter guy. And he's dying. And COVID comes, and the man who's the life of every party, can go anywhere, loves wine, like everything else. There was nothing the guy could do, except for until he finds this outdoor music venue and concert event center. And he starts talking about it so much that my wife Corey goes online and she buys him a $100 gift card to the place. And my dad's forgetful for me, so he keeps forgetting to use it, but he keeps going out and he keeps writing, oh, you're gonna love this place.
Your dad's talking about Barnhill.
He's talking about Barnhill. And so I hadn't connected it, but while we're out there and when we started going through the buying process, I put two and two together. And I was like, I
So
didn't.
y'all finally took your dad out there, used the gift certificate.
Yes, use a gift certificate.
And you didn't know it was the place that you were looking at online.
Well, I finally, no, so we had a handshake deal 3 days before my dad was actually supposed to come out.
Okay.
Right? And so, and it was all under NDA, but once we had a handshake deal, I said, hey, Dean, I said, the guy I was buying it from, I said, hey, this is the story of my dad. I didn't tell you before because I didn't want it to factor into the deal. I wanted you to, only do it if it's right for you. And so, and I was like, but this is a story. I was like, can I tell my dad I'm buying it? Oh yeah, of course. And so he wanted to meet my dad. My dad came out. And I called my dad and I'm like, hey dad, I'm really looking forward to our concert 3 days from now. And he's like, oh yeah, you're gonna love this place. And I'm like, yeah. I was like, you wanna sit down for a minute? He's like, is everything okay? I'm like, yeah, everything's great. It's like, that place, yeah, it's great. You're gonna love it. I'm like, you're not gonna believe this, Dad, but we're buying it. And he's like, what? It's like, you don't even drink wine. Why are you buying it, right? And so anyway, we laughed about it and we went out. We ended up buying the deal, of course. And here's the cool story. My dad his health continued to decline. And this is a cool praise story. Like literally the guy is all but dead. He's got a couple hundred feet of cord. He's living in his house. And he's connected to this machine that breathes for him, right? And he's getting so weak, he's having trouble making his own food, and like his life is short. We get the phone call, and because of someone's generosity and having to say goodbye and make a tough choice to someone they love, my dad got the call, and he got 2 new lungs. And so if he could be sitting here right now, and you wouldn't know that he's got 2 new lungs in his body.
Wow.
But what was really significant about the Barnhill thing in particular was the real miracle is that we survived it, but he came and lived with us for a while after the surgery because we were his primary caregivers. Yeah. And he got to walk around and recover every day. They had, things they wanted him to do, and like he had to walk so far and everything else. And he got to do that all on Barnhill, which was his favorite place, right? It's like the place he talked about all the time. So it was really cool, really sweet to be able to be a part of that. And all that connected like as a tapestry of like, it just looks like we bought Barnhill and moved out there, which is true. Yeah. But behind the scenes, there were all these and I could give you 10 more stories like that, but it's just like, we know we're supposed to be there and we love it. And so every weekend, Fridays and Saturdays, we do ticketed live concerts. We do live music. We do some corporate private events. People want to do like company parties, team parties, holiday parties. But we create community. So we have parties that people can have their parties inside of. You came, I got the pictures. I was out of town.
Yeah, it was awesome. Went to Garth Brooks night and we all dressed up in crazy Garth Brooks shirts. It was
y'all
awesome.
looked the part, right?
It's a really cool place. So it's a really cool place. We should get up there more often. It's all connecting, so it's not really that far. It's just north of McKinney.
Well, now 121's open all the way up that way, so that speeds it up a lot.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, man, look, we could sit and talk for hours.
10 hours.
I really appreciate your friendship. I appreciate you spending time with me. And I'll tell you, man, that slap in the face at Texas Stadium really had a big impact and really helped me understand that. And so, here's to living in the game as much as we can.
Well, I love you, and the pleasure is all mine. And I'm so grateful for you and just the friendship we've had. I'm grateful for EO and everything that's come from it. And to steal from Dan, like one of the things he says, you can't have a bigger future until you've had a more useful past. So thanks for giving me a chance to reflect on my past a little bit today, and hopefully we'll see some even more bigger future.
Yeah, man.
For both of us.
I've had a great time getting to know the journey, man.
Yeah.
I appreciate you.
Yeah, love you, bud.
EO Dallas, thanks for spending some time with us. Like I said, all the gratitudes when you look back, and we're all going to live in the gap sometimes, but here's to living life in the game. Appreciate you.